Welcome to the Maritime Executives podcast series, In the Know. I'm Tony Munoz, Editor-in-Chief. Our Executive Corner podcast will provide conversations with top executives concerning events and issues that are shaping our industry today. We will also bring you up to speed with the latest news and editorials covered by the Maritime Executive. Good morning, Maritime Executives. It's another podcast, In the Know, and we're pleased today to have Matthew Zimmerman, is the founder and CEO of FarSounder. He started the company 2 decades ago, and today his product, the Argos 3D Forward Looking Sonar technology, is now available, and we're here to speak to Matthew about that. Good to
Hi,
meet you.
Tony. Hi,
Good to
Tony.
meet you.
Thanks for having me on the podcast today.
Our pleasure. Our pleasure. And tell us a little bit about yourself and your education and the inspiration about the FarSounder.
Of course. Well, I live in Rhode Island,
Okay.
and as many of you know, Rhode Island is the ocean state, and we
Love it.
have a great affinity to the water here locally. And I started growing an interest to the marine environment when I was in college. I went to the University of Rhode Island, where I studied ocean engineering as well as French and German languages. And through my academic career, I had the chance to really interact with the marine environment through the ocean engineering program. And around that time, we had an oil spill locally off of Moonstone Beach. In the world of oil spills, it was quite small, but from a local impact point of view, it was really quite big. And it was caused by a barge hitting a rock, spilling oil. Also, off the coast of the waters in the northeast of the US is the home of the North Atlantic right whales. And for them, one of their leading causes of death is ship strikes, basically being hit by boats and ships and being injured and dying. And so we thought there must be a way to help vessels avoid hitting rocks, causing oil spills, and avoiding hitting whales, causing ship strike deaths. And you know, we are fresh university students and engineers and professors, and we thought that can't be that hard. Well, it turned out to be a lot harder than we thought and took a lot longer than we thought. However, in 2001, I formed FarSounder to commercialize the technology that I began working on while a student at the University of Rhode Island. And I like to joke that when it came time to graduation, I either had to find a job or turn this into the job. And I wasn't smart enough to know that I should just go find a job. So we formed FarSounder in 2001 to commercialize the technology and started shipping our first products, our legacy FS3 sonars, back in 2005. Since then, we have expanded the company and the product line, and we now service a whole lot of customers all over the world. And for me, that's a great tie-in because, as I mentioned, I also studied foreign language while I was at the University of Rhode Island. And as you know, the marine environment is worldwide. Ships and boats go everywhere. And so I've been really fortunate in being able to develop a career in technology and engineering in the marine environment, but also have the opportunity to travel all over the world as part of my job. And that's something that I really particularly enjoy with interest in languages and cultures and how that blends together in a in a corporate and job environment is really quite interesting to me.
You had mentioned that you travel the world, and what are some of the prime segments of the maritime industry that you're really work in? Is it commercial, or is it pleasure, or both? Or
We do a little bit of everything. Our initial customers, when we started shipping equipment back in 2005, our first two customers were expedition cruise ships and giant super yachts. Both of these customer bases go places that are pretty exciting, a lot of exclusive destinations that are not well known and well charted. Since then, we still do a lot of work with both of those customer bases, and we've expanded to other sectors of the marine industry as well. Not just giant super yachts, but also merely large yachts,
Mhm.
owner-operated trawlers, and so forth. We are doing a lot of USVs, so the uncrewed surface drones, uncrewed surface vessels, for both defense and commercial applications. We are installed on a number of Coast Guard and Navy vessels around the world, survey vessels. If you think
Mhm.
about a surveying vessel, if they're doing a survey, by definition, they don't know what's there. And they use our equipment to make sure it's safe for them to go in with their survey equipment and build the official chart surveys.
Interesting.
Research vessels going from the Arctic down to the Antarctic and everywhere in between. So basically, if you have a ship or a vessel or a mission that needs to access an area that you can't rely on the charts, that's where FarSounder equipment comes in.
I love this name, the Argos 3D Forward Looking Sonar. Is the latest sonar released about the company from the company? How long has it been released? And and tell us a little bit more about the product itself.
Sure. The Argos is actually a series of forward-looking sonars. We have
Gotcha.
three models:
Hmm.
the Argos 1000, the Argos 500, and the Argos 350, that are cleverly named by their maximum detection range of 1,000 meters, so more than a half nautical mile, 500 meters, more than a quarter nautical mile, and 350 meters ahead of the vessel. Other than the sensor component, which we call the transducer module that is in the water, these three products in this product line are essentially the same. It's the same software and inboard equipment. And what these products do is they look out ahead of the vessel out to navigationally significant ranges underwater. They're a real-time system. You can think of it very much an analog to radars and cameras above the water,
Hmm.
forward-looking sonar below the water. Except operating as a real-time sensor is not the only thing we do. Our products also build a depth map of everywhere they've been. We call that our local history map. And
Wow.
so when you're using the sonar to help you safely navigate into an unknown area, or even a place that was previously known but might be different now, like after a storm or other natural disaster,
For
there
sure.
may be new sandbars. There may be oil rigs that have been lost. There
Hmm.
may be debris that washed into the water from the shipping terminals, and a channel that was previously safe is now completely unknown. You can use our forward-looking sonars as a real-time sensor to navigate safely in those areas, and then build a map of everywhere you've been. So it's exciting to be able to use that information to help you now make your way out of a place that you've entered to and for planning your next trip and entrance into those areas.
Yeah, considering the weather systems these days and the changing environment undersea, that's a big deal. I mean, dredging is a huge part of commercial shipping throughout the world.
Mhm.
Continual, constant. It's just part of the maintenance budget for a lot of ports now. So this is really interesting stuff. I think most of us um, recall the old Navy subs where they would hit the sonar buttons and try to check out the depths and all that. It's obviously changed a lot.
Yeah, and it's not just the seafloor that our customers are concerned with. Obviously, the seafloor is important. You don't want to run aground and hit something on the seafloor, but it's also things in the water column floating just below the surface.
Mhm.
So shipping containers, whales, icebergs. These are all transient objects that, even if the chart is really good for that location, these are things that can't be on the chart by definition because they're constantly moving
So
and
many
changing.
emotion, right?
In other places, there are seasonally dependent sandbars, where in wintertime it might be one clearance depth, and summertime a different clearance depth. So charts really aren't always reliable. As you probably know, the US has the best charts in the world, and we've mapped only about 52% of US waters. And in fact, if you go off the coast of Alaska, Captain Cook, from his voyages of exploration, is still official data in some places on US charts. And so now imagine, what are the charts like when you go elsewhere? Uh, Not only is the information lacking, it could be old and out of date. It could be maybe a correct depth measurement, but incorrectly placed in the wrong location. And in many cases, things that were just completely missed because older technologies for building a map was taking a point here, a point there, a point there, with spaces in between. And they assumed if there was nothing here and nothing there, that there wasn't something here in the middle. That is not always true. Coral heads, rocky pinnacles, just things that were not included on these early surveys. And that's exactly what our products were designed to be helpful for.
Yeah, outstanding stuff. I mean, really, and when you think about Captain Cook and they're still using that map, it's pretty amazing stuff. Um,
Yeah.
so, a lit- this is a little bit when we were talking about this, or I was reading about this. I find it really hard to believe that only 25% of the ocean's floors have been mapped, and less than 5% have been explored by human beings. That to me was wow, it was very eye-opening, and it did explain to me, the vastness of the ocean and the complexity of the ocean. And we once interviewed I think it's Gabby Gifford's husband, the astronaut.
Mhm.
And he had said he had gone to the Merchant Marine Academy, and also was an astronaut. And he said that if you think of a highway, that's the way the cargo ships go. They're on a path either way, going back and forth. But we have a lot of other type cargoes that are moving around the world from place to place. So it's not as uniform as that particular trade lane. But yeah, so I thought that was pretty intriguing that
It totally
5%.
is. And as a comparison, back in 2017, we had mapped 99% of the surface of Mars at a 6-meter resolution. And that statistic you said about the seafloor, this year, the latest update is just over 26% has been mapped. But that's at 100-meter resolution, which is enough for general basic scientific knowledge of the ocean, but
Mhm.
certainly not detailed enough for navigation. Imagine having one point every 100 meters and trying to navigate by that. Certainly better than nothing, but that
Sure.
doesn't give you a complete picture. Uh, Certainly the shallower coastal areas have been mapped a little better, but it's only a little more than half of coastal areas have even been mapped to modern standards.
Yeah.
And so you mentioned these shipping channels.
Hmm.
Think about the Caribbean. Like, yeah, the main transit lanes, those are fairly well marked, and that's fine for commercial shipping. And the history of nautical charts in the US was how to facilitate commerce. NOAA is part of the Department of
Right.
Commerce. They
For
are
sure.
not part of the Department of, environment. They're part of commerce. And so how do we get cargo from one place to the other? But that's only one user of the marine environment. And as soon as you get out of these known shipping channels and transit lanes, even well-known destinations like the Caribbean are still so unknown. The Dutch have territories in the Caribbean, and they recently refit two of their coastal patrol and survey vessels with FarSounder sonars. Yeah, their waters off of the European mainland of Netherlands is well charted, well understood. But their territories in the Caribbean, once they're outside of those transit lanes, are very poorly mapped. And they're using our equipment to make sure that their survey and patrol vessels can get into those locations safely.
You're not a scientist.
I'm not a scientist, but I am really excited about being able to enable scientists to
Right.
do things with my tools and technology that my whole team at FarSounder has developed.
So, what is the IHO crowdsource? How do you say that? Bathymy?
Yeah, crowdsourced bathymetry.
With a
Well, I'm sure that
working
many
group.
of your listeners are familiar with the IHO. They are the International Hydrographic Organization, and they are charged with setting the standards for nautical charts and surveys. But they don't produce charts or produce the surveys. They're just the ones saying, here's the standard. Now, all of your different countries and hydrographic offices, you can produce charts and surveys to these standards so we know what type of quality it is. Because so little of the world's oceans have been mapped, one of the initiatives of the IHO is to bring in crowdsourced observations of depth, bathymetry. That's just a fancy scientific technical term for depth. And the idea is there are so many vessels going all over the place, and nearly every single one of them has an echo sounder and a GPS. So if they could record their depth measurements and record their location, and then share that with a centralized database, that is a huge trove of information that could be used by scientists. It could be used by hydrographic offices to identify places where they should spend their limited budgets to go and improve the surveys. It can be used by climate modelers as an input to ocean currents and ocean climates that directly affect the atmospheric weather,
Mhm.
which is really important for the insurance agency. Understanding how to judge a risk from the weather is one of the really important things. So depth and bathymetry is really valuable.
Right.
And I have been representing FarSounder on the IHO's crowdsourced bathymetry working group for a number of years. And it's a working group consisting of academics, government hydrographic offices, and a handful of industry participants. And our goal is to come up with the standards of what is crowdsourced bathymetry, how to collect it, how to store it, how to access it, and then try to actually recruit participants to contribute data. And there is a initiative called CBED 2030, and they've really been the face of the crowdsourced bathymetry movement. But they are also not actually doing the collecting. They are really doing the PR, promoting it. And it comes down to uh, participants, people with boats, vessel operators, uh, taking the next step to actually make these recordings and share them. For FarSounder customers, I mentioned that we build a map of everywhere we've been. Our latest functionality in our products is they can anonymously share that across the FarSounder fleet. So they have access not just to their own map that they've built, but the map of all the other FarSounder systems aggregated
Yes.
together,
Mhm.
completely anonymous, completely secure. So there's no information about whose vessel or who's on the vessel or even the
Right.
vessel name. And in conjunction with that, we also contribute data at the 100-meter resolution that CBED 2030 is what their goal is to this IHO run database. So our users are not only getting the highest resolution maps with the highest quality metadata, which is the position and vessel characteristics for depth surface offsets. But they're also able to contribute anonymously to this global effort to help map the world's oceans. And so you mentioned 25% coverage. That was last year. This year is a little over 26%. So there's only about 74 more years to go before the total ocean will be mapped. And of course, nothing is going to change in those 74 years. So this is a big effort that's going to take a long time, and it will never be complete because things will always be changing.
Always be changing.
Hence
Amazing.
the reason to
Yeah.
have a 3D forward-looking sonar and the reason why FarSounder's technology was developed.
Now, we talked a little bit about the whales and ship collisions,
Mhm.
which is extremely painful to talk about.
Yeah.
What is the progress with that today?
Well, as you probably know, whale populations globally in general are decreasing,
Right.
and there
Exactly.
are a number of species that are protected and endangered. And on the east coast of the US, the North Atlantic great whales are critically endangered. There's about 350 of these animals left in the world, and their two leading causes of death are entanglement in fishing gear and being hit by boats and ships.
Yeah.
Well, the Far Sounder can't do anything about the fishing gear. That's really not our area of expertise. But we can help solve the problem of enabling vessels to avoid hitting whales. And not just humpback, not just North Atlantic great whales. It's all types of whales. Uh, in the U.S. on the East Coast, there are a lot of humpback whales.
Mm.
They are not classified as endangered species. But what's really interesting about them is, although there's a large population of the humpbacks, they're really grouped into much smaller
Yeah.
insular groups. And
Right.
so maybe there's X thousand of animals in this area, but it's a few hundred here, a few hundred here, a few hundred here that don't interact. And
Right.
so once that population gets too small, it collapses.
Yeah.
And so even though there's a lot of these humpback whales, they're very separate, small communities. And so there's really a great risk for them as well.
Yeah.
Over the past couple of years, we've been collecting more and more scientific data on the reflectivity of whales. And turns out they're great sonar targets. We produce a sound because we're an active sonar that goes out and we listen to the echoes of everything that the sound waves bounce off of. So what's critically important for any sonar technology, and this has been critical in the design of our products, is to ensure that the sounds that we produce are not themselves causing harm to the environment, because we don't want to solve one problem
Right.
by creating another problem. So the sounds that we transmit are lower power and less energy than commonly accepted commercial echo sounders. We are quieter than a dolphin itself when they're pinging away. And for the great whales, they can't even hear us because we're out of the hearing range of them. Fortunately, NOAA has done a great job of uh, outlining specifically what they believe constitutes acoustic harassment. So sounds that can bother, change the activities, or even hurt marine mammals. And we have completely ensured that all of our activities fall well below any of the limits in those guidelines. So we are more benign than other commonly accepted marine acoustics. And we think that's really important because we want to protect the whales. We want to be part of the
Of course.
solution, and we don't want to cause any other problems. I can say that I've been personally involved in a lot of our on-water data collection efforts, working with humpback whales, and it has been truly awesome experiences. On my last trip, just 2 months ago, out in Stellwagen Bank, we were on a 49-foot research vessel that we chartered, and we were hanging out with whales that were like 50, 60 feet long. In
Wow.
some cases, we were like 10 or 12 miles offshore and the only vessel out there. And you could hear the whales come up around you. You could hear them breathing. It was awesome. And
Yeah.
so for anyone that's been around a whale in their natural environment, you have this feeling of there is an urgency to protect them.
Right.
Having vessels and boats operating in the waters worldwide is really important to the global economy, really important to local cultures, really important to recreational and scientific activities. And we can't stop those. And we probably shouldn't stop those, but we need to figure out how we can do these in a way that is going to reduce our impact on the environment. And that was, like I said earlier, FarSounder's original motivation. is really environmental. How do we avoid oil spills and how do we avoid hitting whales? That was what drove us to develop these products and technologies.
Yeah, amazing, amazing accomplishments.
Thank you.
And so what are the future developments on your agenda?
Well, I talked a little bit earlier about how we're sharing the depth maps anonymously across the FarSounder fleet.
Right?
Now that we have this cloud service in place, allowing and facilitating the sharing of data, in our next revision of our software release, we're going to be adding a observation button for the operators where they can, if they see floating trash at sea or if they see a whale, they can click the "I saw a whale" or "I saw trash" buttons. We will piggyback those observations on the same cloud service that we have in place for sharing the depth measurements. We'll aggregate them and then pass that off to the relevant endpoints. So the organizations that are charged with monitoring and protecting whales, we will pass on those whale observations. For organizations that are focused on building maps and knowledge of where are these floating trash patches, we want to report these observations and passing it on to them.
This is great stuff. I mean,
Yeah, when you
it
talk to the
really is
bridge
great
crew,
stuff. Yeah.
thank you, thank
Yeah.
you.
Well, when you think about it, you're immediately going to somebody's going to hit a button and they're going to be able to let somebody know that there's something going on at a certain place and time,
I've
and
talked to a lot of crew, and not just FarSounder customers, but
for
crew in
sure,
general.
for
And
sure.
so many of the crew have been moved to pursue a career at sea because of a love of the sea and the environment. And I'd say overwhelmingly, the vast majority of crew want to be able to do things that can help give back to global efforts to protect
For
that
sure.
environment.
Yes.
And think about, bridge watchstanders. Most of the time, standing watch on the bridge is watching and observing and waiting for something to happen. They're seeing observations of trash and whales and other things that
Right.
they've noticed. Well, let's pass it on to people that can actually use that information
Yeah. Right.
and give them motivation to participate, even in this small way. If everybody does a small thing, why not? Why not provide these informations and these capabilities? It can really help the whole global community. So I'm
Well,
excited
I have
about.
to say that what you're doing here, it's an amazing company. I'm glad to have spent a few minutes with you. We can do this again sometime
Thank you.
as things develop. But yeah, this was. My wife is going to love to hear about the whales.
Thank you. Thank you. Well,
Thank
I
you so
appreciate
much.
your time, Tony, having this conversation. It's been 23 and a half years since founding FarSounder. It's been a fantastic trip so far. Uh, my team and I personally have had the opportunities to get on board a lot of interesting vessels, go a lot of interesting places, meet a lot of interesting people. And as our product line continues to expand into more capabilities and more product features, we're continuing to access different and more sectors of the marine market. And I'm sure there'll be lots more new stories, new things I can learn. And I'm
Great.
excited to see, like I said before, I'm not a scientist, but how can we as engineers at FarSounder contribute to not just the maritime life, but scientific exploration?
Well, we love your enthusiasm. We very much appreciate what your company, the innovations that you bring to the industry, and good luck and thanks for your time.
Thank you, Tony. Have a great day.